This is going to be a bit of a touchy topic because, of course, we're dealing with actors and their performances. Performances that are, of course, dictated according to the text and modified by the director, but still it is the actor's performance themselves. Now, technically speaking, if you are going to adjust a performance, you should speak to not the actor themselves, but the director or the first AD, something like that. But I'm sure you'll also notice that occasionally camera operators will say, can I get you to walk in and kind of banana around this and hit this and kind of lean on your left, shift your weight over to the left a little bit as opposed to standing square in order for a camera to get the right angle. That's technically adjusting a performance because an actor is going to walk in and they're going to have to think about bananing around something and hitting on a mark and then shifting their weight. That's going to technically keep them, give them something to think about while they're doing their performance, right? Now, sometimes the director is going to use the word organic. They're going to say, I want this to be organic and natural. It's going to be what it is, man. Well, here's the thing. And I really don't want to sound like an elitist jerk. Sometimes people have told me in the past that in the 3BO series especially, sometimes I come across as a know-it-all elitist jerk or whatever. Here's the thing. And I don't mean to sound that way. I'm going to go ahead and say this up front. From a sound perspective, we still have a job to do, and we're going to push for it. And sometimes that might mean being a little bit more direct. Now, obviously, play diplomatic, do everything you need to and follow procedure protocol. And of course, be respectful, keeping in mind, of course, said etiquette. Now that all that's said, how can you go about modifying a performance, especially one that a director is like, I want this to be an organic performance. I want it to come from the inside and just, you're in such turmoil. You're going to just feel it, go with it. Okay. Even in those circumstances though, an actor is going to have to play in a certain area because a director is going to have lit for that area. Or a DP rather, not a director. And so if an actor suddenly stands up and walks away, the DP is going to say, no, they got to stay here over here because of the lighting. And if the director says that can't work, it's got to be organic and natural, the DP is going to say, fine, I need another hour to light the rest of the room. Plain and simple. Now, sometimes that means a lav will not play very well on an organic performance. If an actor, for example, covers up their face and puts it on a table and they're crying and sobbing and saying words and it's a wide and a tight, there's nothing really you can do because their live is going to be, it's a table, it's going to be crushed. Even if you put a plant on the table, that actor could be shoving everything all over the place. That's the reason why, in order to adjust actors' performance, you're going to most likely be able to do that the most when you're in some sort of a medium or tight shot, because the wide is the geography. It's kind of playing the world, playing the scene. Now, you do also need to plan in advance. If they do the wide first, they're going to have to match for that in coverage. So if you see something in the wide shot that you think is going to be a difficult time when you're going to boom them, you're going to have to adjust that and say to the first AD usually, and they'll probably just tell you straight to talk to the director, depending on the level of the show you're on. If you're working on television or tier 1, 2, tier 2, tier 3. If you're working on a big Marvel show, pretty much it is what it is. They're going to have to ADR the movie anyway. Plus, there's not a whole lot of gut-wrenching acting, sobbing, crying into your hands, and that kind of stuff that happens in those movies. Usually they try to keep it fairly light and upbeat, even though there is emotional stuff you still see in their faces. Now, organic performances like the ones that I just was talking about, though, if you see something in a wide shot, address it in the wide before you punch in. That's the first thing to really keep in mind. When you get into that coverage, though, and you might need to speak with the director of photography to make sure that they're not going to continue to do wide shots at the same time as the tight. If the DP doesn't seem to get it, that your lav isn't going to be doing much good, because that's the thing that you're going to always hear. Aren't they laved? Well, it's not going to do a whole lot of good when they're sobbing face down in a bed, is it? Well, it's just going to be muffled anyway. Well, still, I get it. But they're talking and saying something you might, they say, well, can you get it wild? You don't want to have to resort to things like that. If you have to get something wild, get it wild, but you don't really want to have to do that. And by wild, I basically mean do a special pass just for sound when the actors are performing for the sound. Now, even with an organic performance, though, the actors are still having to keep in mind perhaps geography, like where they're moving around on the set or how they have to geographically move around something. They also have to play to the camera. They can't just decide organically to turn their back on the camera and direct all their lines facing away because they just feel it in the moment. They're still going to have to play to camera. Otherwise, it doesn't work. In the same kind of way, they have to somewhat play for sound. And I understand there is emotion. I understand that a natural performance is necessary. However, these people are still actors. And a director may encourage them to be organic and natural. And he may say, okay, fine, I sign off this. I don't want to deal with this. I want them to concentrate on their performance. Here's the thing about that. And you need to keep this in mind too. If that sound does not work for what you're recording there on set, they're going to have to recapture that emotion that they're feeling in the ADR booth if the sound doesn't work. Do you think an actor is going to be able to, months away from having finished the movie, they're going to have to go back and say, oh, geez, where was I mentally in that scene? I've gone on and done 3 more TV shows and 2 more movie appearances. Then what was I thinking? How am I going to recapture that? They're going to be thinking it. And it might be worth mentioning subtly to the director, their performance is amazing and I want to make sure I capture it. And I understand that you want it to be organic. However, and this is just me talking to you, not the way I would speak it to a director, but you understand that the performance is amazing and you want to be able to capture that so they don't have to recreate that in ADR later. That might be a good tactic for you to keep in mind as you go to approach a director. In the past, I have said things like, I feel where you're going with this. However, the sound isn't really working. Is it possible for them to whatever the case may be? Is it possible for them to do this so they don't have to try to recreate this in ADR later? Sometimes putting it in words like that, a director will think about it and sometimes they'll say, geez, I don't know. I really want to let them go. And if they say that, they've signed off on it. Then you have to communicate it with the sound mixer, say, look, director does not care. You're not going to get your way out of this. We're not going to get our way out of this. It is what it is, unfortunately. However, there are still things that you can do. I have in the past on movies, like big budget shows, talked and conveyed something to a first AD and they've said, go talk to the director. Sometimes the first AD says, yes, good point. I'll mention that. Sometimes they've said, oh no, they're never going to go for that. And that's fine. Either one, you've at least mentioned it and done your job. And the reason I say go to the first AD on the big budget shows is because the director usually interfaces with talent and usually the DP. And the DP will talk to the operators. And there's not a whole lot of communication sometimes between the director and the camera operators even. It's always DP and director each handle, visual performance or visuals. But the first AD is always safe. And if they say, oh, go mention it to the director, that's a safe way to do it if you're not sure. I've been in circumstances where I've realized that time is of the essence and we don't have time to really talk about things a whole lot. And I've gone straight to the director. And sometimes the directors are receptive to it. Sometimes they'll be like, I can't but be bothered by that. No, that's not what's on my mind. I'm not, don't take that up with me. Talk to the first AD. Hey, that's fine. Do that in the future. However, there are some things that are very key. This morning, I was watching The Wizard of Oz, right after the witch. Okay, fine. Spoiler alert, even though this was a movie from 1939. Spoiler alert, in effect. When the Wicked Witch of the West has water thrown on her and she melts. When Dorothy Gale, right after that, says, can we take the witch's broom with us? The broom, may we have it? And the soldier on the ground says, please, and take it with you. There's the point where he says, please. And at the exact same moment, it's like his metal gauntlet hits the edge of the broom and it just makes a ching noise. It just makes a clink, a ding type noise. And it's just that noise right there, right over his please before it dies down. Please, and take it with you. That please has always been one that is very harsh to me. It sounds very strong because you instantly hear that he goes, please, and take it with you, right over the line. You can't have that happen if there's any way to control it. Quite often, actors are going to not be aware of the way it sounds because just as well as anyone else that when you're listening in headphones, it sounds totally different to you in your headphones than it does if you take your headphones off and listen to the real world. Actors don't know how things sound in headphones. They don't know that the most subtle little sound in the background is amplified by your microphone and pulled in. Nor do they even know that we often do hear their breathing or hear their stomach grumbling and that kind of thing. Otherwise, they'd probably be self-conscious about it. However, things like picking up something right over a line, closing a door on a line, those things can be problematic, especially in post. because they're going to try to isolate that and try to you can easily add a sound effect over a word, but it's a lot more difficult to remove that without cutting in on the vocal frequencies as much, even though it can be done in modern technology. If you can, though, talk to an actor or actress or first AD and say, could they not close the door over their line? This is an example of a show that I worked on probably, over 10 years ago. I don't remember when exactly, but there was this one circumstance. This actress, the leading actress in the show, she was from theater, and she was used to doing things for lighting cues or because a prop needed to work a certain way. Ask her to do something for sound, and it was like, I can't act now. Now I can't act. That was literally what she would say. Is we had a circumstance where she had to go into her bag, and I brought this bag out for a reason. She had to go into her bag and find something. And over her coverage, it was a close-up like this, and you could not see the bag in her lap. So all she had to do is act and pretend to find whatever it was and then pull it out at the key moment. However, she had to go and find it. So over her dialogue, she was like doing this the whole time. And it's like, can we not do this? All this is just all over the dialogue, and these sounds are not necessary. She was looking down, no less, too, because she was searching through her bag. We didn't see it on camera, just like you're not seeing it on camera right now. If she had it up here, we could see it, and we could hear it. But it was down in her lap, where it was out of the camera, but we sure heard it. So I asked if it would be possible for her to pretend to find it, or to not even have the bag, and for her to just have it on her lap, or something to that nature. She was like completely flustered by that. She was like, you don't want me to act. Fine, I won't act. I can't act. And instantly the director of the first AD was like, no, we want you to act. Don't worry about it then. Do what you need to do. The same actress had no problem in the world walking into a room, bananing around. This is where this is the situation. She walked in the room, bananaed around kind of wide, cut tight to another chair, put something down on the table, stood back up, shifted her weight onto one hip, and then kind of angled over in a really awkward way. So that way her body kind of contoured one camera a certain way, and she was still square to the camera. Very awkward circumstance. I can't even do it right now, but she had to do it. She had to walk in around something, kind of cut close to another chair, put something down on the table, and then stand back up, shift her weight onto one leg while kind of, and you say, why couldn't you just have her shift over? Because there was a chair there. She couldn't stand and against the chair. Otherwise her body wasn't doing what it was supposed to. So she had to shift one way to kind of go over the chair. Why couldn't it move? Because later in the scene, they had to physically move back and sit down on that. But anyway, it was really crazy. She had no problem in the world doing really awkward movements like that. She could still act through that. But oh, heaven help you, when I asked her if she opened up the door and said, hey, to her friend, and addressed the friend by name. We're going to call her friend Angie. Hey, Angie, how you doing? And close the door. But she didn't do it in a sound-friendly way. She went, hey, Angie, how you doing? Closing the door right over her line. And that was a loud door because it was a hollow set piece without ceiling. So every bit of that reverberated through, no carpet, that kind of thing. It was very, very loud, and it just slammed and made this big echo sound right over her voice. I asked if she could walk in and say, hey, Angie, how you doing? And then close the door. Get her line out first, then close the door. A modification of about half a second, and she freaked out. Now I can't act. Oh my God, I can't believe you're trying to do, and then the director's like, what's going on? No. We want you to act. We want you to act. However, the actress that she was working with had the first line, greeted her and said, hey, welcome home. Now, how could the other actress be a professional and address this and modify her performance in a way where she was going to be helping the situation because she was a pro and understood the circumstance, while the on-camera person didn't? Well, instead of saying, hey, welcome home, and then the person responded, hey, Angie, how's it going? Or whatever the line was. Instead of that, instead of saying, hey, how's it going? She said, hey, how's it going? And delay long enough for her to come in, close the door, not on her line, and then did it. That was a professional actress that had a lot of experience on set. You're going to run into both kinds. You're going to come into the people, I can't act now because you've asked me to do one little bitty thing. The world comes to an end. You're going to also run into the kind of people that the director is going to have no problem telling them to do something for camera, but tell them to modify something for sound. No, I need this to be organic. But keep in mind also the whole thing of having to recreate that performance in ADR if they're mumbling their lines, if there's a wide and a tight. If nothing else, you can say, okay, could we at least shut down the wide shot then and do this tight, because that's where it's going to play and that's where you see all this emotion. And I want to try to get the sound somehow. That would at least be a compromise where shut down the wide shot. You know that they're not going to be playing an intimate, person's not going to be crying into their hands on a table, playing in a wide shot for most of the time. Sure, it may be one or two shots pulling back to a wide to show how the person's being isolated and alone for whatever dramatic effect they're going for, but you don't need to play the majority of the scene that way. Maybe shut down the tight and just do the wide by itself, do them separately. Okay, now, I mentioned a couple of different things. There are times, though, that I will go and address certain things with the actors directly. But you have to be careful not to tell them something that adjusts their performance. For example, don't go over and say, hey, can you speak louder? If you do that, that adjusts the performance, because an actor who is used to delivering a line like maybe this loud, you tell them to speak it up, and suddenly it changes the whole entire scene the way it's supposed to be delivered with the lines. It may not be supposed to be a loud scene. There may be also a circumstance when two actors are talking in a quiet, in a very loud nightclub type situation, and you're like, you know what, your performance is not working at all because you're basically, you're on a dance floor talking to someone, but you're talking in a whispering volume. No one on a dance floor is going to be able to communicate with someone talking this loud to each other, even if it's supposed to be intimate. You still got to yell. I mean, you're in a nightclub. That's the kind of thing you'll address with a director. However, there are times that you're going to have to address some things with an actor. And one tactic that I will use and have found to be great success is instead of telling them to do something, make them aware of something. Like, for example, opening and closing a door over their line. Perhaps the actor is not receptive to it, but let's pretend they are for a second. You could say, just to make you aware, you close the door right over your line. Oh, got it. I won't do that. They're making the choice. You made them aware that they closed the door right over a line. If you tell an actor, try to get your lines out or pause or something, say, oh my gosh, I can't seem to find it. Or better yet, since it's off camera, oh my gosh, I can't seem to find it. Where is it? Oh, here it is right here. And now they found it. Something along those lines. It plays just fine. It's going to give a better product to post to have to deal with and for the director to build their reel off of. And the actor's performance is going to be much better because it's going to look and sound better on camera. It's not going to be as distracting hearing all this shuffling and stuff over the dialogue. People are going to be like, what in the world is going on? Watch older movies and you'll see a lot of action taking place over dialogue. And they're playing it in a wide shot where the camera moves in a little bit and it still maintains a full shot. And then they pull back out. But there's a lot of action happening and there's a lot of activity going on and sounds that are keeping you from hearing the dialogue. Back then, they usually would have a preambulator boom that would be hovering over the top of set with the microphone, 4 feet over the actor's head and picking them up very naturally, mind you. But they're also going to be picking up everything else, which is louder than many actors are if they're not stage trained. So, I mean, let the truth be known here. That's something that we have to kind of deal with is the performance aspect of non-theater trained actors who are not used to speaking up, trying to use their dynamic range as part of their performance. When you can very easily train someone to do a stage whisper, you can very easily train someone to do certain things if they have the gumption mentality and the desire to, let's say. With regards to adjusting performances for sound, though, you might want to, especially if you're on the green side, communicate with your sound mixer and say, would you want to try to get a little bit more volume out of that? Or am I right in my thinking that they should be speaking up more for this because we're in a loud environment and, there's a jet taking off behind them? Oh, yes, you're exactly right. Things like that. And in those circumstances, you can mention that to the director or the first AD and say, they're in a nightclub. They're not really speaking up like they're in a nightclub. Can we, oh, yeah, I'll address that. Or something to that nature. Performances, even those that are considered organic and natural, can be modified for sound and still have them work, especially if they're younger. There's a great success story I have on a show that I did a few years ago. The most of the cast, number 1, number 2, number 5, 6, 7, 8, most of the cast were teenagers, played by people that were either teenagers or in their early 20s. Now, many of them were fairly new to acting. Might have had a couple of shows under their belts, if that, but they were all fairly new. When I started the show, season 1, they would put down something on the kitchen counter and it was almost always over their lines. The show, especially the producer, was very, he liked me. We got along great. I did multiple shows for him. He also knew that I had his interest in mind, that I saved him a lot of money in post. So if I said something, he would take it to the letter. He would believe me and he would say, let's do what he says. If it came to that, almost always he would have my back on it. I can remember only one circumstance in the two seasons I did with him, which was like 30 some odd episodes, that it didn't go my way. Okay. It was about 30 episodes roughly, I think. Okay. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because the actors on the show were young. And they did not understand certain things, like don't put down things over their dialogue. And I had them so well trained that if they put down something over at the end of one line and you were facing and the camera was on me, put it down at the end of the line and then said another line, on the turnaround, they knew the timing. But sometimes, because they were in the middle of a monologue, they had to put it down and we saw the table. But if we were going back and forth, sometimes cross-covering or something like that, we had them so well timed and trained that they would sometimes say, okay, I'm going to put it down here. And then on the turnaround, they would actually change their timing together. So that way they would put it down on the other person's off-camera line at that point. And then when the camera was turned around this way, they would put down the cup down on their off-camera dialogue when the camera's facing them. And they would time it. So even though it went down on a different word, it was funny because I made that suggestion first in the middle of a monologue, and then they were going to be flipping back and forth. It was a specialty circumstance. But then when we saw the show, it just magically worked. Why? Because it just simply cut back and forth, and you saw the person put down the cup. And as long as you see it only being put down one time, and the timing is only a second or so off, it doesn't really matter. Post will work through it. It's not forcing an edit by saying like, oh, it's got to be done this way because they put down this on a certain line. Technically speaking, as long as it's going down there and being a cup is being placed down, as long as it's not over the on-camera dialogue, you're technically okay. And that's most ideal. Training actors younger and training them to things like, one of the things we had an issue with on that show was performances being ruined by people messing around right off set. They would drop something, they wouldn't stand still. And so a couple of times, since it was a very relaxed type set, I'd say, please have respect for the actors, their performance, okay? As soon as they would say, okay, reset, let's take this back to 1, I'd say, guys, please quiet down, show some respect for the actors. The actors started getting that in their heads. I deserve respect for my performance. You're right, I sure do. And they started to kind of modify that. Now, granted, you can't just yell that out on any set. They're going to be like, whoa, who is talking? Even if it's a reset. If it's a reset back to 1, I would say, have respect for the actors and settle, please. Something like that, real quick and easy. It's, a second and a half is what it took me to say that, something like that. And the actors would get the message. And they would start hearing for sounds too. Things that they should actually not be happy with or tolerate, like people dropping things right off set. I remember a person opened up a Coke or a canned soft drink at some point right off set. And it was like in the middle of a scene. You're like, are you kidding me? You were on the other side of that set wall and you decided to crack open a Coke in the middle of a take? That's the kind of thing that we train those actors, those young actors, to not tolerate. can we please get quiet? As soon as they'd hear something like that, you could tell that sure, they could go ahead and act their way through it. But all it takes is addressing it once or twice. Now, if an actor addresses something like that, always make a point to thank them about that, not in the middle of the take or saying, yeah, really, or something like that. But as soon as the take is done and the actors are going back to their holding tent or their trailer or whatever, see if you can intercept them. And even if it's just for a moment, say, I appreciate you speaking up like that. It really does matter. And I love that you got it, that you get that. Something like that reinforces good behavior. Obviously, don't talk to an A-list actor that way because they're going to think it's condescending. Say, I appreciate you having my back on those off camera, on those sounds that people keep making off set. Appreciate that. Because actors are going to be listened to much quicker than sound will. I mean, granted, sound is the department that needs to make sure that our tracks are clean. But if an actor says something, they'll listen to an actor. So when it comes down to modifying actors' performance for sound, think about what that entails. If it is performance adjusting over, to try to reduce a sound, is it because you're trying to reduce something to avoid a dialogue over something? Is it to avoid having, whatever the case may be? Think about that and then talk to the appropriate person about that. If you have a pretty good working relationship with an actor, you may just make them aware of something, not telling them what to do, but make them aware of a situation. And there have been many actors that I won't even bother talking to the ADs. I'll just say, just to make you aware. And they'll be like, I got it. I know exactly what I need to do. Especially seasoned actors. They'll usually, if they're not already aware of it, they're not that big. Maybe B-list actors, something like that. There's a lot of very good actors that I've worked with that just don't work on the big, huge budget movies everybody would know them for if they worked on those. But they're still very, very good. And they already know everything they need to do. And if it's something that they'll say, I'm going to take it back because I put this down on a line. Oh gosh, I love you. There was this movie I did with Kevin Kline. I had been talking to the DP, the first ADs, the director, because there was a fireplace. First day we had Kevin Kline on set, fireplace, and it was just gas, just seeping up through there. And they had the fire so low, they didn't want it up very, very much. They wanted it just a little bit. Well, when you choke off the gas just enough, it makes it hiss even louder. And it was terribly loud. And because this is a period movie, it did not work at all. And it was louder than normal. And you didn't even see the flames. I was like, can you even see the flames? Flames are on. The operator would be like, occasionally I'll see it flicker, but for the most part, no. And I'm like, this is playing. He's telling a story. It's in a tight. Well, we do have a wide shot. It's not going to play in a wide shot, though. I mean, that's the honest truth of it. That a scene like that with Kevin Kline telling a story is going to play in a medium and a tight. But they still insisted on having that through the wide and the medium shot. Okay. Kevin came to set. He looked at this and said, do we really need to have the fireplace on? You can't even see it's on. And we're like, thank you. This is a fight that we had been having for so long. We don't even see it. Well, we feel it. I'm like, how do you feel it? You don't see it on. The operator didn't even see it. He says only occasionally. The DP wanted it on, even though, but it was mainly the director that wanted it. And the first AD was just not willing to address it. But as soon as actor came to set, it got shut down real quick. And he was right. Watch the movie. They didn't even use the wide shot. It was pretty funny. But anyway, my point is, you as a filmmaker, a sound person is a filmmaker. You know how this has got to, after watching the rehearsal, go together in your mind, where you need each line to be based on a boom, a plant, a lav, whatever the case may be. You need to already have it worked out in your mind as where things are going to be and how. And if there's a line that is going to be obstructed in some way by a performance of an actor or hindered in your ability to get it, see if there's a way for you to do that. There's sometimes even circumstances where actors will be looking down or turn their face, or they're going to say, okay, well, I'll see you later then. And they start to turn their head and walk away in the middle of a line. Well, when you're doing the coverage of that, sometimes one of the things I'll say is, can they finish their line before they walk away? Yes, that's a good point. That way they see their face on camera the entire time. Okay, I'll see you later then. Thanks. And then they turn their head. Because if I say, okay, yeah, I'll see you later then. Thanks. My voice goes away. Sure, I can follow them with a boom, but it's so much better if they just face the camera the whole time. Sometimes, and if you can somehow tie in a performance adjustment for sound that also helps picture, oh yeah, good one right there. You're going to have a great chance of getting it adjusted. Anyway, well, hopefully some of these or all of these things will help you in getting your tracks cleaner on set for the sake of the actor's performance, keeping it organic, and of course, making it just sound so good and rich. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.